All right. We've got a couple of folks joining us online. That's cool. John is joining us online and Brenda's joining us online. Well, he's seeing me. He's not seeing you. John had too much partying last night. I think he went home before we did.
And it was like a 200 Bible church people there last night. Tom Pickens and
It's your birthday, isn't it? Tomorrow. Okay.
Yeah, Kyle was there. Korchonik. Kyle Korchonik. All right, y'all, we're going to jump in and notice the title today.
Fall and rise of a king.
The fall and rise of a king. Not the rise and fall. The fall and rise. Okay, so I did that on purpose. So today we're going to be doing another story that I would say it is a junior high school Sunday school class, not a children's Sunday school class. So it's something that you may have heard before, but if you didn't, it won't surprise me. No, please don't. There's a reason I didn't teach junior high school. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to be in Daniel chapter 4 today. Okay. So we're still going in order. I was going to try to skip around and just hit the important parts, but I'm like, no, I've not taught this before. So I need to do it all. So Daniel chapter 4, starting in verse 1. King Nebuchadnezzar, to the nations and peoples of every language who live in all the earth, may you prosper greatly. What stands out right away?
All the names.
Who's speaking?
Daniel.
Nope. This is King Nebuchadnezzar speaking. And he's addressing the people.
Oh, right.
To the nations and people of every language who live in all the earth, may you prosper greatly. It is my pleasure to tell you about the miraculous signs and wonders that the Most High God has performed for me. More indication that this is Nebuchadnezzar speaking. How great are his signs, how mighty his wonders. His kingdom is an eternal kingdom. His dominion endures from generation to generation. So what impressions does the king now give us?
That he's following God.
Sounds like he's a believer. Okay. So who is this Most High God that he's talking about? Is it one of his? Okay. So this is Jehovah God that he's talking about, the Most High God. So this is a true witness. He didn't get trained in seminary. He wasn't even raised in the church. And basically all he's doing is saying, hey, everybody listen. This God that I didn't know before, that I know now, has done all of this great stuff for me. And I want you to hear all of this great stuff that he's done. And that's really all there is to a witness. So you don't need to know all of the scriptures. You don't need to have any training. You don't need to go to Thursday night witnessing class or whatever they do. You don't. All you got to do is just tell your friends about what God has done for you. And then God takes it from there. It makes it really simple. So he is proclaiming the glory of the God who has shown himself to Nebuchadnezzar in a way that truly changed his life. So is Nebuchadnezzar a true believer? That's yet to be seen. Yeah, that's yet to be seen. So he's pretty zealous right now with all of the stuff that he's witnessed God do. So in the Aramaic versions of the Bible, so remember that Daniel is written in half is in Aramaic and half is in Hebrew. So this part is in Aramaic. And in the Aramaic Old Testaments that we have today, these verses are actually tagged onto the end of chapter 3. They're not at the beginning of chapter 4. So what did we learn about last week? I know you slept since then. The fiery furnace. And so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were thrown in this blazing furnace and they didn't burn up. And Nebuchadnezzar was amazed. And so he gives this proclamation of God after being in amazement to what didn't happen to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So it fits there.
And the fourth person.
And the fourth person, which that leaves the question, because some translations say it looks like the Son of God. Some says looks like an angel of God, and some says looks like a son of the gods. So depending on what translation you have, it leaves it up to question as if that was Jesus in there or not. We don't know for sure. That's why in that list of Christophanies that I gave you last week, I had a little asterisk by that one because we don't know for sure. Okay, so verse 4, I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at home in my palace, contented and prosperous. I had a dream that made me afraid. As I was lying in bed, the images and visions that passed through my mind terrified me. So I commanded that all the wise men of Babylon be brought before me to interpret the dream for me. Now, we know this is different than that first dream that we talked about in chapter 1.
Statue dream.
Yeah. So how do we know that it's different? The first time he couldn't remember what the dream was. And he just needed somebody to tell him, what was this dream that terrified me so much? And what does it mean? Well, now he remembers the dream. It still scared the bejeebers out of him. Verse 7, when the magicians, enchanters, astrologers, and diviners came, I told them the dream, but they couldn't interpret it for me. So we know this is a different dream. Yes, sir. He didn't kill him. Daniel talked him out of it. Daniel talked him out of killing all of them before. And that's how, but Daniel's now chief. He's in charge of all of them.
So Daniel talked him out of killing them, and then they said to kill Daniel because he wasn't bowing to the king.
Yeah. Yeah.
Get that straight. Mean girls, I'm telling you.
So verse 8, finally Daniel came into my presence and I told him the dream. He is called Belteshazzar after the name of my God. So is he a believer in Jehovah God? No, he's still claiming Baal as his God. And the spirit of the holy gods is in him. Right. So his name has stuck, but he said after the name of my God. So he's still claiming at least that there's still many gods. Okay.
But he's also still proclaiming the wonders that he witnessed.
So he's like adding our God to his.
So exactly what the Greeks and the Romans did. If they needed an extra god, they just added that god to the list. Okay, so that's what's going on here. Filled with fear, Nebuchadnezzar again sends for his wise men, the magicians, the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. But like the astrologers who tried to explain the first dream, they hadn't the slightest idea of what it meant. At last, Daniel enters the audience chamber. I said, this is Nebuchadnezzar speaking, Belteshazzar, chief of the magicians, so he's already gotten his promotion, he's in charge. I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in you, and no mystery is too difficult for you. Here is my dream. Interpret it for me. So what did Nebuchadnezzar say distinguished Daniel from the other wise men? He says, the spirit of the holy gods, plural, is in you. Okay. So again, some translations say the spirit of the Most High God, but the translators are assuming that Nebuchadnezzar actually had a true conversion experience and left those other gods in the ditch. But that's not what happened. The spirit of the holy gods is in you. Verse 10, these are the visions I saw while lying in bed. I looked, and there before me stood a tree in the middle of the land. Its height was enormous. The tree grew large and strong, and its top touched the sky. It was visible to the ends of the earth. Its leaves were beautiful, its fruit abundant, and on it was food for all. Under it, the wild animals found shelter, and the birds lived in its branches. From it, every creature was fed. In these visions I saw while lying in bed, I looked, and there before me was a holy one, a messenger coming down from the heaven. Any of y'all have a different word in your Bible?
Watcher.
Watcher, messenger. Yeah, watcher. That's important. I'm going to come back to that one. He called in a loud voice, cut down the tree and trim off its branches, strip off its leaves and scatter its fruit. Let the animals flee from under it and the birds from its branches, but let the stump and its roots, bound with iron and bronze, remain in the ground, in the grass of the field. Okay, what do you think? All right, so we see two metals here that we saw in the chapter 2 statue. And we know that iron represented a time of strength, a new kingdom. That was the Roman kingdom. And bronze, which was a very decorative and strong kingdom. And that was the Grecian Empire. Okay. So it's no coincidence that these metals show up again. Let him be drenched in the dew of heaven, and let him live with the animals among the plants of the earth. Let his mind be changed from that of a man, and let him be given the mind of an animal, till 7 times passed by for him. Verse 17, the decision is announced by messengers. The holy ones declare the verdict, so that the living may know that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth, and gives them to anyone he wishes, and sets over them the lowliest of people. So this is all still his dream. So in his dream, Nebuchadnezzar sees a great tree. The way that he described it, it's huge. It's touching the sky. Was there something else in Babylon that was built so huge that they were trying to touch the sky? It was the Tower of Babel. That's where it all started. The Tower of Babel was built on where Babylon was built. Okay. And all of that demonic influence and everything that invaded after God destroyed the temple and scattered the people still had a very strong presence there. And so that is one of the scholars that I read said that's why Nebuchadnezzar was so tormented by dreams, that the demonic influence was so strong. But I think that's kind of a reach, but okay, we can go with that. So what happened to this tree? It got cut down. So do you think this is really about a tree? Can't be that simple, right? So a messenger from heaven gave the order to cut down the tree, but the stump and its roots were to be left in the earth. Now, some of the translations of the Bible have watcher here instead of messenger. The word only shows up in Daniel. This is the only place that that word shows up. And also in the apocryphal book of Enoch. Okay, now remember, that one didn't make the cut. It's not in our Bible, but it's another book that's suitable for history and some ideas as the culture and mindset of the ancient Hebrews. And it's said that, I'm not going to say it is said, in that newish movie with Russell Crowe, Noah, those big rock monsters that helped him build the ark, those were supposed to be watchers. Okay, that's this special class of angel. They are angelic servants of God who form a heavenly council that listens to God's word and then acts as divine messengers to bring those commands to humans. Now we get that from Jewish teachings. Okay, it's in the Tanakh. It's not in any of our Christian books. Okay, so that's what the Jews believe. The Jews have a whole history and hierarchy of angels that we don't have. And the reason we don't have it is when the author of the book of Hebrews wrote, basically he dissed all the angels, saying, y'all need to quit worshiping angels. Okay, that's not what we're supposed to do. And so Christians don't. We acknowledge them. We know that they serve a purpose, but we don't worship them. Okay, any questions? Okay, some of this is new. I'm getting a little side eye. So I just want to make sure everybody's. He is a holy one, so he has a special purpose. And that purpose is to be on God's counsel and to deliver messages, which is why messenger is used here to kind of avoid the idea of what's this watcher.
But I did think it's interesting that the tree was cut down and its roots were still in place and it was still watered.
Yeah, so we got to talk about that.
So I thought that was interesting.
So what details of the dream show that the tree was symbolic of some particular man?
Well, the bronze and the.
As soon as the tree's cut, all of a sudden it's not about a tree anymore. It's saying, let his mind be the mind of an animal. So now we're talking about a person. Okay, so the tree's cut down and now we're talking about a person. Okay, so that's a idea. That's how we know the tree is not a tree. The tree is symbolic of a person.
It's 7 periods of time.
We're going to get there. And it says the heart of a man was to be changed to the heart of a animal. Okay, beast. All right. So for how long was this change to last? That's not what Daniel says.
7 periods.
He says 7 times. Okay. And so this has always confused things. And this is why I have to talk about Daniel before I talk about Revelation, because we get some keys of time out of the book of Daniel. Okay. And it's not seasons, actually. So the way this works, I'll talk about in this next slide in just a minute. So what purpose was this dream given? So it finishes in verse 17. To let people know that the Most High God rules over the kingdom of men. So God's meaning to teach a lesson here. I am not one of the many gods. I am the one and only God. That's the lesson that he's wanting to give here. Okay, so let's talk about times. So remember that Daniel is a history book, but at the same time, it's also a prophetic book. We talked about that when we talked about this 90-foot tall statue, where we've got the head of gold, which represented the current kingdom of Babylon. And it was replaced by brass and bronze and iron and clay. And that was history moving on. So Babylon's future, our past, because now we know that those represented the kingdoms of Persia, Greece, Rome, and now the European Union, which is the iron mixed with clay at the feet. Okay, so we do know it is a book of prophecy at the same time. So in this scripture, when it says for 7 times, that's a new kind of way to look at time. It doesn't make sense. Periods of time. But this word times here, it's a weird word. It applies to the law of twice fulfilled prophecy. Now, those of y'all that have been in my class, what is that idea? The law of twice fulfilled prophecy. All right, so there's always a part, that's correct, there's always a part of that prophecy that will come true within the lifetime of the hearer. That way they know that this is a true prophecy. but the much greater meaning of that prophecy is going to be way in the future somewhere. Okay. So being prophetic as a book, it follows this same law. There's something that happens in near history, and there's something that happens in far history. So in the first fulfilling of this prophecy, times means years. Okay. So in the case of this dream and interpreting what this dream means, this person's intellect is going to be replaced by beastly things for years. So 7 years. Okay. That's this first fulfilling. Times means years. As far as prophetic time periods, Ezekiel 4:6 gives us some help. Ezekiel 4:6 says, I have appointed you each day for a year. Okay. So 7 times would be 7 360-day periods, because the Babylonian year wasn't 365.25 like ours. It was just 360 days. And then they had a leap month every once in a while, a 13th month. So that's 20 days, which is 7 Babylonian years. Okay. So in this first prophecy, which is all I'm talking about today, it is 7 Babylonian years. All right. Then Daniel, verse 19, also called Belteshazzar, was greatly perplexed for a time. So who's writing now?
Daniel.
This is Daniel writing. And his thoughts terrified him. So the king said, now I got a quote, Belteshazzar, do not let the dream or its meaning alarm you. Belteshazzar answered, my lord, if only the dream applied to your enemies and its meaning to your adversaries. The tree you saw, which grew large and strong, with its top touching the sky, visible to the whole earth, with beautiful leaves and abundant fruit, providing food for all, giving shelter to the wild animals, and having nesting places in its branches for the birds. Your Majesty, you are that tree. You have become great and strong. Your greatness has grown until it reaches the sky, and your dominion extends to distant parts of the earth. Okay, which is why he's referred to as King of Kings. He's an emperor. He's a king over all of the other countries' kings by conquest. Okay, so when Daniel understood the dream, he was greatly troubled. For a while, he couldn't speak. The news was bad. But after the king had urged him to tell all, Daniel faithfully revealed this terrible truth. So which man did Daniel say the tree represented? Nebuchadnezzar. This is you, O king. Your Majesty saw a holy one, a messenger, coming down from heaven and saying, cut down the tree and destroy it, but leave the stump bound with iron and bronze in the grass of the field, while its roots remain in the ground. Let him be drenched with the dew of heaven. Let him live with the wild animals until 7 times, 7 years, pass by for him. This is the interpretation, Your Majesty, and this is the decree the Most High has issued against my Lord and King. You will be driven away from people, and you will live with wild animals. You'll eat grass like the ox and be drenched with the dew of heaven. 7 times will pass by for you until you acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and gives them to anyone he wishes. All right, so here we've got a picture of a stump that is capped with bronze and iron. In ancient times, there was a way to preserve the stump for a season, not necessarily a growing season, but a length of time, before grafting a new tree to it. I found all kinds of pictures where it showed a stump with a brand new sapling stuck in the middle of it, grafted into it. So using the strong root stock in order to grow a new tree. So this method required the protecting of the stump by binding it with a relatively non-reactive metal. It was capped in bronze and then wrapped with iron. And this prevented any new growth until it was removed. It also kept bugs and rot and anything from getting into the cut section of the tree. But if it rained and everything, the roots would still be watered, right? So the idea of iron and bronze, though, we already said, pointed back to the metals that we saw in the statue. Now we know that each of those metals represented what? An age of a different kingdom that was set up. So this is why Daniel is saying there's going to be other people on the throne. And you're not during this time. So this is still pointing to someone else that's not you ruling. What is your country? Okay. The cutting down of the tree meant Nebuchadnezzar's fall. So how long was he going to be forced from his throne? 7 times, which now for this prophecy is 7 years. Okay. What would bring about the end of Nebuchadnezzar's banishment from the throne? This is in Daniel 4:25. And it says, till you know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men and gives it to whomever he chooses. Okay, so he's going to have an animal mind and spirit 7 years. So the command to leave the stump of the tree with its roots means that your kingdom will be restored to you when you acknowledge that heaven rules. So what part of the dream assures Nebuchadnezzar that he will be restored? The roots are still there. The stump is protected and you will be reestablished. But what does he have to acknowledge? God is the only God, and that God actually is king. Okay? And he's really what's in charge, who's in charge of the kingdom. All right, so any questions so far? How many of y'all have heard this before? 3, 4. All right. I figured it'd be about like that. Verse 28. All this happened to King Nebuchadnezzar. 12 months later, as the king was walking on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon, he said, is this not the great Babylon I have built as the royal residence by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty? Verse 31, even as the words were on his lips, a voice came from heaven. This is what is decreed for you, King Nebuchadnezzar. Your royal authority has been taken from you. You will be driven away from people and will live with the wild animals. You will eat grass like the ox. 7 times will pass by for you until you acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and gives them to anyone he wishes. Immediately, what had been said about Nebuchadnezzar was fulfilled. He was driven away from people and ate grass like the ox. His body was drenched with the dew of heaven until his hair grew like the feathers of an eagle and his nails like the claws of a bird. So, just 12 months after Daniel's warning, 12 months, what boastful words came from the king's lips? Is not this the great Babylon I have built as my royal residence by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty? This guy has an eye problem. I, me. So even while the king was speaking, this voice comes out of the heavens saying, your royal authority has been taken from you. And at this, Nebuchadnezzar became insane and he was driven from the throne. An unusual fragment of a tablet from Babylon, now in the British Museum, was published in 1975. it's considered possible that it refers to Nebuchadnezzar's mental illness. The inscription says, life appeared of no value to him. He does not show love to son and daughter, and family and clan do not exist for him any longer. So I thought that was kind of neat. I couldn't find any more information on it though. So that'd be a homework assignment if you want to dig deeper.
I thought the one before it says your royal authority has been taken from you,
Mhm.
and even though he wasn't a believer, he was still given the authority by God, and it was taken away from him by God.
Good point.
So
Very good.
that was interesting. Even if you don't think so, it's true.
Yep, very good. Verse 34, at the end of that time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes toward heaven, and my sanity was restored. Then I praised the Most High. I honored and glorified him who lives forever. And this is Nebuchadnezzar's song. His dominion is an eternal dominion. His kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the peoples of the earth are regarded as nothing. He does as he pleases with the powers of heaven and the peoples of the earth. Excuse me. No one can hold back his hand or say to him, what have you done? So what's he acknowledging here?
He's number one. God's number one.
All of the power that he thought was his was God's. God gave it to him, just like you said, and God took it away. And God's glory is what counts as everything, and people are under that. So that's where it says that he doesn't care anything about the peoples of the earth. The peoples of the earth are regarded as nothing. So that's just saying that God moves people as he pleases, and it doesn't always please us. At the same time, my sanity was restored. My honor and splendor were returned to me for the glory of my kingdom. My advisors and nobles sought me out, and I was restored to my throne and became even greater than before. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and exalt and glorify the King of heaven. Notice it's not the King of Daniel, the God of Daniel, the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That's how he said it before. Because everything he does is right, and all his ways just. And those who walk in pride, he's able to humble. So at the end of 7 years, did God keep his promise he made to Nebuchadnezzar in the dream? So the question that I had, was it really about 7 years? Or was it just however much time it took for Nebuchadnezzar to say, God's in charge?
God knew the future. He sees the future.
Right.
He knows how long it will
Yeah,
take.
and that's where I'm setting. So it took that long for Nebuchadnezzar to come to his senses about who God was, and it just happened to be 7 years. So in this case, I wouldn't say 7 is the number of completion and required that much time. And no, I think God just said it's going to take him 7 years, and so I'm going to tell him in the dream that 7 times Daniel's going to explain what's going to happen.
Also, Daniel told the king and everybody that this was gonna happen, so after 7 years, I mean, people could have forgotten about it, and then after 7 years, like, oh, 7 years, something's supposed to happen, let's go see if the king came to his right mind. And it said
They sought him
his
out.
nobles
Go
came
check
and sought
the
him
corral.
out, right?
They sought,
So that was, yeah.
yeah, they
That is-
sought
yeah.
him out. All right. Did Nebuchadnezzar change his attitude toward God? Yeah. Is this pride and arrogance now gone? Yes. Do you think the king had a genuine change of heart? Notice what he said after returning to the throne. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and exalt and glorify the King of heaven. If you're going to refer to someone else as king, what does that mean for you? You're below them. You're submitting. You're going to serve. Okay? Because everything he does is right and all his ways are just. And those who walk in pride, he is able to humble. Okay? All right. So after the image dream, Nebuchadnezzar said, God is the God of gods. So he still has this polytheistic mindset. There's a whole bunch of gods, but Daniel's God, he's strong. Okay. And he said that he's the Lord of kings. So maybe a God for kings, not a God of crops, a God of rain, a God of whatever. It's a God of kings. Okay. And that he's a revealer of secrets. So talking about what he did. In the fiery furnace, he says, blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That wasn't a conversion experience. He was just saying, wow, you got a great God. Okay. And no other gods can deliver like this. Again, talking about God's acts, not who God is, and especially not who God is in relationship to him. Okay. So by comparison, what did Nebuchadnezzar say after his restoration? Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, whose works are truth and his ways justice. Okay, that's true conversion right there. So can you think of one or two appealing and important things that we can learn about God from Nebuchadnezzar's experience? Since God's the same yesterday, today, and forever. God is still in control, and he's still going to put in charge who he wants in charge.
Like Nebuchadnezzar, even after 7 years of being an animal, when he gets his right mind, he still praises God for it and says, even though I went through this, I needed it because now I know who you are.
Yeah.
But he's still in control today.
Yeah, absolutely. And he also can bring down the proud.
Well, and he knows how long you're gonna go through something. How long it's
Yeah.
gonna take.
Yeah, one of the important scriptural phrases that I use a lot, and this too shall pass. I don't know how long it's going to take, but this is just a short time. And so I say that to myself often.
You should say it to yourself. You don't say it to
Often.
anybody else.
So, well, there's other people that I've said it to when they're down in the dumps because of a situation. All righty. That's the end of the account of Nebuchadnezzar as king. We don't see him as king anymore. That's just the end of that story. Belshazzar takes over as co-regent of Babylon in 550 BC. Belshazzar is not to be confused with Belteshazzar, which is Daniel. This is a different person, Belshazzar. Belshazzar is the eldest son of King Nabonidus, who ruled from 555 to 539 BC. And Nebuchadnezzar's daughter, Nitocris. I don't know where the emphasis is supposed to be. Okay, so it's his grandson that takes the throne. So Nabonidus is his son-in-law, Nebuchadnezzar's son-in-law. He's king. He goes into self-imposed exile at 550. So he's going on walkabout to examine his kingdom. That's what he does. And while he's out and about with his armies, he tells his son, you're in charge of the throne. Okay. So next week, when we pick up, it's going to be with Belshazzar and what happens to him. I'll give you a hint. He's the last Babylonian king.
So it doesn't show anything else about Nebuchadnezzar's reign, who's a good king after that?
We've got historical stuff, but it's pretty sketchy. I mean, he's still conquering and building kingdoms.
But he's still a believer in the Most High God.
History won't tell us that.
Yeah, the story is done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So who and where were they ruling from in that 7-year period? I'm thinking as things were conquered and taken over, like was his palace taken over?
Was Daniel in charge?
It would have been a region of some sort that would have been in charge during that time.
I thought it was one of the other bronze or the.
No, it was just, that's just symbolic that it would be ruled by another for a temporary time.
Oh.
And we don't know. It's
Yeah,
not,
that's
it's not really in history. I mean, they didn't know until 1975 if Nebuchadnezzar actually was a king of Babylon and beyond the biblical reference, right? And if he actually went insane, that's still debatable. And how long was he insane?
But they found a tablet.
But then they found this tablet, which they haven't said definitely shows, but it's a strong indication. And so we don't know who would have ruled in his place. What happened to his son? Because it did say on that tablet that he regarded his son and his daughter
I was gonna say, if
no more.
the daughter, if her husband became king, what happened to the son? So.
Yeah, so there's
He
still a
didn't
lot of,
regard anybody, because he
No.
was animalistic and
yeah, yeah. So we have no more
So
no more
they
information.
don't know what year that happened, that those 7 years, when that was, no indication.
Right. Right. So that's all I've got about the fall and rise of a game. Any questions? Okay, next week is another neat one. I don't know if I'll be able to pull 2 chapters in or just one. I haven't got into that study yet. I know what the chapter is about, and right now in my mind, I can skip all the fluff and get to the good stuff and then move on from there. But I might get into the fluff and say, yeah, we need that. So I don't know yet, but we will go into the next chapter of Daniel.
And next Sunday is our 40th wedding anniversary.
Wait, is next Sunday, what days? Are we gone?
We'll be here, 25th, we leave 26th.
Okay, okay. I don't even know.
tomorrow, I'll be there.
I don't know. All right, cool. That is all I got.
Is your mama's birthday?
It is.
Oh. Yes. So I her ring that she gave last night, and I'm drinking wine, and I said, you think she cares if I bring her ring and drinking a glass of wine? No, she doesn't.
She's drinking wine herself right now.
I just have to get this-
She didn't drink?
No, against it? No, she did drink, but she just forgot what she did.
She was very against it.
Oh.
So she's a hard shell Baptist, hellfire, brimstone.
But yet, when I was 17, she made me my first drink. And she goes, I never did that. Oh, yes, you did.
Oh, my goodness.
Amaretto sours.
Bye, y'all online. Thanks for joining us.